Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. And this video pretty simply is going to be a thank you and sort of a video to respect the Chelsea careers of Willian and Pedro, which have officially now come to an end. Willian, breaking news today, Willian confirming his departure from Chelsea Football Club. We've known Pedro was leaving Chelsea for a while now, going to Roma to play in Serie A, but there was still maybe some doubt maybe that Willian could stay at Chelsea. That has been less and less in recent days. It's pretty clear he'll be moving to Arsenal in the coming days too. It feels like the end of an era. That is the sentiment that's being shared across social media today, and I think that is an apt sentiment for sure. I feel that even though I've wanted, not in sort of a harsh way or an abusive way, these players to move on, I felt it was just naturally the right time for both their Chelsea stories to come to an end. I felt that with Frank Lampard moulding this squad in a new image, the faces coming in, Hakim Ziyech coming in, especially on that right side where both of these players have played predominantly for Chelsea over the years, and the young players this year that have flourished like Christian Pulisic, you see Callum Hudson-ODOI, other players as well who could play in that area. It just felt like the right time. I felt like Chelsea would be staying in the comfort zone, keeping these players a year longer. Yes, we know Willian, especially, I'm sure Lampard would have liked to have kept Willian because of the fact he's lent on his experience so much. He's been a key first team player this year. No one can deny that. And he's had a very good year, I think, for Frank Lampard. And in some people's eyes, top 3 player this year for Chelsea. And I really can't argue with that, as we'll get into. I wrote pieces on both of these players for All Things Chelsea and Chelsea Fancast. All Things Chelsea, I wrote, of course, on Pedro, and Willian was the Chelsea Fancast piece. I'll leave both of those pieces, written pieces, in the description box below so you can go and read them for sort of the full story and my opinions on their Chelsea careers in whole. But I wanted to sort of just generally talk about them today because I think they deserve respect and appreciation. I think Pedro is widely admired at Chelsea. I don't think, like Willian, he divides as much opinion, even though I think both have sort of delivered sort of similar things at Chelsea. But I want to start off with Willian because he is the longest servant at Chelsea. Arrived in 2013 from Angie, that infamous transfer where he had a medical at Tottenham, looked like he was going to join Tottenham, and then Chelsea swooped in at the last minute with Jose Mourinho, convinced him to come to West London instead. And of course, that inspired that infamous chant, one of the best chants we've seen at Stamford Bridge in a number of years, that has followed Willian all the way. And I'm sure even though Willian has left now, I'm sure Chelsea fans will still be singing that for a number of years because of the connection to Tottenham. And he would go on to score some big goals against Tottenham Hotspur over the years for Chelsea. Willian has, it'd be stupid of me to not admit he has divided opinion over the years. I think I've always been a fan of Willian because I think longevity and consistency. When I talk about consistency, I'm sure the first thing people will throw in my face is look at the amount of goals, look at the amount of assists. I think that Willian, for me, the fact that a number of coaches at Chelsea in the time he was at Chelsea picked him consistently as a first-team regular, and that's when I wrote that piece last week going through his Chelsea career, and also the competition he had, especially in that first season, the number of players Chelsea had sort of in the 4-2-3-1 Mourinho was playing at the time, the amount of players Mourinho could have fielded there, and the fact that Willian very much broke out as his consistent starter on the right side. As well, Eden Hazard, living in the shadow of Eden Hazard. The title of my piece about Willian is Willian's biggest crime is not being Eden Hazard, but he was still brilliant for Chelsea. I think that's true. I think Willian, Eden Hazard was an astonishing player and he dominated so much of Chelsea's attacking play that it was always going to be hard to compete with such a world-class talent. But I think the consistency of Willian and the work rate, especially under Mourinho in his early years, I think was exceptional. It really was, and it helped Chelsea in a number of games. And Willian over the years did pop up with big goals. And I think, as you saw this year, he was a player that could be relied upon by a number of managers to step up in big moments, to really help the team. Consistency, work rate is things that I think the supporters love about what Willian did for Chelsea Football Club, and I think you need to admire that. And there were moments of quality within there. He scored some big goals. I remember the 14-15 season scoring that goal against Everton late on. I remember that being a very stressful evening. I think it put us like 7 points clear of Man City. He was a key component of that starting 11, and Branislav Ivanovic, in a piece for The Athletic recently by Simon Johnson all about Willian, said that his best football of his career was played with Willian in front of him, and I think that tells you a lot about Branner, the players he played with, the amazing triumphs he had at Chelsea Football Club, that he rates Willian that highly. I think probably in retrospect his 15-16 season, which was a disaster for Chelsea, will likely go down as his best. That was where we saw the best of Willian, and I think it really showed a lot about Willian that as Eden Hazard struggled and really faded that year, Willian stepped up, scored some amazing goals. Free kicks wise was absolutely astonishing that year. The amount of brilliant free kicks he hit in were ridiculous for Chelsea. It really was. I was there for some of those moments. The Dynamo Kiev one was a special moment. I remember that night. I remember the support that night was very much behind Jose Mourinho, who's going through a difficult period and was inevitably going to be sacked in a couple of weeks' time. But I think Willian consistently through that year was class and very much deserved his player of the season. I think, the only problem I think he had at Chelsea was with Conte, and that was very much, it's interesting when you contrast Willian and Pedro, because Willian very much kept out a bunch of players. Kevin De Bruyne was sold, Mohamed Salah was sold, Cuadrado was sold, Andre Schürrle was sold. Willian seeing out all those players over a number of seasons at Chelsea, but Pedro was the one player who really challenged him for that spot. And I think Pedro, I was there for his first game at the Hawthorns in the away end. That was the 15-16 season as well, very disastrous, but Pedro, I mean, you just felt the class of Pedro. He scored in that opening game, was brilliant all round that day, and you just felt this was a player that was going to be special for Chelsea and was going to add some class to us. I mean, the CV of Pedro is just absolutely ridiculous. That was even before he joined Chelsea Football Club, but now leaving Chelsea Football Club, winning a Premier League title, winning an FA Cup, winning a Europa League as well. It's amazing, and I think Pedro as well provided some classy moments. I think the endearing smile, the trickery, just a small thing about Pedro that I loved was the way he'd pick a ball out of the air, with his foot, and it just shows you the class of Pedro. I loved at times when very much through, the tiki-taka style of Barcelona, you'd see him maraud around the pitch with the ball at his feet. Sometimes there was this one moment I'm sure it's been shared so many times. I think it was against Everton where he just took the ball through sort of our defense, and you didn't know where he was going, but it was just the trickery and the flair of Pedro, that carefree nature that we love to see from Pedro, and he scored some big goals for us as well for a number of managers. His best season was probably the 16-17 season under Conte. We won the league title, scored some big goals that season. I remember a curler at home to Tottenham, which was a big goal, and the Everton goal away, which was probably his best goal for Chelsea. It really was at a key moment in the season that, like Willian, helped us to go and win a league title. I think both players, as I say, I think will be fondly remembered. I think Willian, the criticism of Willian, I think it does frustrate me at times, because I think the longevity of a player like that, I think will be missed. The consistency and the work rate of that's something that, for a player at a top club to be relied upon by a number of managers, I think tells you a lot. And I think that I really hope now that even if you were frustrated by Willian, look back at his best moments, look back at this season. He's ended the season, his last season at Chelsea, he ended with a lot of great moments. I think he really was one of the best performers this year for Frank Lampard in a difficult season, in a challenging season, a transitional season for Chelsea Football Club. And I think Willian done himself proud this year. I think his only indiscretion was the Conte emoji gate, as people called it. That was the only moment to me where I felt he let himself down and really told sort of how toxic things have got between him and Conte, and I think a number of players. But other than that, I think he's been an amazing professional for Chelsea. I really do. And I think we will miss both of these players in the dressing room. I think it takes a lot to, replace that winning experience, that invaluable experience. I think there were many times over the years where both of these players stepped up in big occasions, and you don't even have to look back further than that. You can look at certain performances this year where maybe we'd had a difficult result, but Willian and Pedro would step up, especially Willian more. Of course, Pedro didn't have a lot of game time this year through injury and, through just selection for Frank Lampard, other players being available and in form, and very much the future of Chelsea. But I think Willian definitely in those remaining weeks of the Premier League definitely had some brilliant games for Chelsea. I think the only shame of this situation is fans not being in the stadium to thank Willian and Pedro. Of course, Willian's departure confirmed after the season is finished, but I think still in that game against Wolves, especially Pedro, would have got a fond farewell by the fans, and I think both of them would have deserved it. So that's a bit of a shame. Maybe, as I say, in the coming years, I mean, it'd be typical that Chelsea maybe draw Roma in European competition and Pedro returns to Stamford Bridge, and maybe fans will be back in attendance. Of course, next season, if Willian is at Arsenal and he comes back to the Bridge, I think he will get a good reception like Petr Cech has in the past, so I don't see that changing. But yeah, those are my opinions on both players. I think both were brilliant signings for Chelsea Football Club. I really do. I think they gave a lot to the club. Sure, won't be regarded as like the top 10 players, I think, for a lot of people, or sort of the legends of Chelsea Football Club, but I think the players were very valuable to the teams they played in some big teams for Chelsea, big trophy triumphs for Chelsea, and I think people shouldn't forget that. Yeah, sure, you've got the likes of Eden Hazard, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, John Terry, but you need other players as well, and I think both Pedro and Willian added that class at key moments to help Chelsea get over the line in some of those big occasions. So I just want to say thank you for both of those players for their time at Chelsea Football Club. I will miss them. I do wish them the best. More Pedro than Willian. I don't hope he has an amazing season at Arsenal next year, but I think both of them definitely go with my full respect and full appreciation. But that is today's video. video. Please let me know your opinion on Willian and Pedro's Chelsea career, some of your favourite moments of those players in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.